Hi, my name is Mike, and I am doing a video series on the WWF LJN rubber wrestling figures from back in the 80s. If you watched my first video, I showed you how to properly clean and your figures and take off as much marker stuff as you can in order to prep them. I have actually been asked to do a couple videos to show the type of materials I use, type of paint, and how I will actually go about, I don't know, what do you call it? Just putting these figures back together again and trying to make them look good. So that's what I'm going to do today. I will show you the different types of paint that I use. I will show you which which paints work best and which brushes. I'm not going to make it a really long video, so I will stop it at times and I will just fast forward through it so you don't have to sit through all the boring part of me actually painting things. So there you go. So this is me actually working on a figure called Slick. If you know Slick from the 1980s, he was the manager of One Man Gang, who would later become Hakeem, and was always one of my favorites because he was a different type of person than I was used to in wrestling, and I really enjoyed Slick and what he did. So here's my video on remaking Slick. Okay, so here's my video on Slick. And Slick, Reverend Slick, whatever you want to call him, the manager of Hakeem, after he was the One Man Gang, who was one of my favorite wrestlers, as well as the Big Boss Man, and took them to Tag Team Championship. And actually, I just read up on him. He's a reverend in real life right now as well. So the plan is to restore him to his former glory as best as we can. So one of the problems that we have is that, and I mentioned this before in my previous video, that sometimes these wrestlers, their color molds that they have are the original rubber is a color that's a little bit different. Like his body is entirely gray. So that's why if you look at his face, and I'm sorry for the camera not being up high enough, I'll fix that in a second. If you look at his face, it looks like someone took gray marker to it. In reality, the paint has rubbed off and it's showing the gray rubber that lies underneath. So one of the issues I'm going to have to do is I will have to, and you can look closely at this, brown is not easy to replicate in these figures, or at least get a 100% accurate color on it. Obviously the blacks and the whites are really easy. I've actually been working with this before I started the video on the grays, trying to match that up with his, and I'm not sure that I've got it just right. I'll probably fiddle with that a little bit. But I decided on the browns. Brown that I'm going to use. I have a multitude of browns that you can see. All these are Apple Barrel, 50 cents at Walmart, but they match up really well. So the one I settled on is brown Oxide. It seemed like it matched the skin tone the best. We're going to see how well that works. The other colors that I'm going to use for now, obviously I'll have to use a yellow a little bit. I'm going to try out the bright yellow and see how well it looks. I'm not too worried about yellow being too bright on this, since these are my figures, and if you don't like it, do your own. The basic black at Walmart works well, and so does the plain old white. Don't have to get too fancy with these. Honestly, when you look at these figures, A, I don't think the paint jobs were great to begin with, and B, the colors were about as basic as possible. So when I start on the figures, typically I'm going to start with the blacks first, because I know that I'm not going to goof that up too much. It's hard to goof up the black. I do have some really close work to do with his eyebrows and his mustache, but I'm used to doing that. And you typically have black on the head, and then most of your wrestlers will have it on their feet as well. Usually a couple coats are all that I need. I'll try to do 3. The Walmart paint dries really fast, so we'll do that. So I want to show you the befores. In terms of the blacks, I will do his vest as well. You can see the back side of his head needs some work. And then his feet, his bottom, and then you always get these scuffed up. So someone was playing a lot with Slick here. So I'll work on this now, and then I'll show you what I have in just a little bit. So when I start these figures, I'll just set whatever paint I need right in front. I usually just use the caps. I'm sure there's like an appropriate way to do this, and I just do whatever I feel like doing. And then I'll pour out just a little bit into the lid. It's a nice little storage thing, so I don't have to do any extra work in cleaning things later. And then, like I said, I will attack the main paint that I have, which will be, in this case, the black. I do have some favorite brushes that I use. Again, these are, if you're not familiar with my first video, I use just plain old Walmart. You can get like a nice pack for $7. I'll get something with an edge so that I can cut things off as I need to. And then I will find some that have, let me find one here. Just a short end on it. Sometimes it's a little stiff so that I can get in different places as well. So I'm not going to bore you with me painting the entire thing. I'll join back in a second, and I will show you what work I have done. Okay, so here's the first layer of work that I did on Slick. I put on the black for his vest. I also did his hair, his sideburns, as you can see. I touched up his eyebrows as best as I could. Clearly, I noticed I just missed his mustache, so I'll have to go back and get that. I got his little goatee there, and then I also did a couple paint jobs, I guess, coats, that's the best word for it, on his shoes. So what I'll do next is I'll go back and I'll finish his mustache. Try and find a thin little paintbrush to do that, and then I'm going to hit his white, and I will also try to do maybe one hand real quick and see how that looks in comparison. I'll tell you what, we'll go ahead and do his high five hand and see how that looks. Now he does have rings on them. That's something that's going to take me a little bit of effort to do, but we'll go ahead and do that hand with the brown Oxide, plain old white, and plain old black. Okay, so we returned back to Slick, and I've done a little bit more work on him, as you can see. Not too bad. I added the brown Oxide to both his hands. I did both of them. I decided to do his face as well, so we'll get a little bit closer on that. No, some of it's still drying on his nose, so that's why you see discoloration on it. It's going to need 2 coats, especially to cover that gray that was coming up. And I'll try and blend that a little bit better the second time around. But like I said, a lot of that stuff on his face is still wet, and so are his hands. I did a run of the white on his shirt that needs a second coat. But as you can see, the black doesn't look too bad. Not at all for his shoes as well. I'm going to make an attempt on the gray because he does have this discoloration up top here and on the back side of him on the other side, and we'll make do with that. So not too bad. Just got to let it dry for a little bit. That's probably the hardest part, is actually being patient. I can see that, like on his arm sleeve there, I'll have to do some touch up with the gray. And part of that is, again, when LJN did these figures, they do a great paint job overall. But, you know, when you lean back a little bit and it's perspective of these drawing, it doesn't look too bad right now. So I'll finish this up, and I'll talk about the final steps as well with Modge Podging, and that's that. Okay, so here's where I am with Slick. I went back and did a second coat on his hands and on his face, and again, still drying, so you do see a little bit of discoloration right there around his eyes and his nose, and later, if I feel like I need to blend that more, I'm going to. It wasn't a perfect match, but here's where your paint does the magic. If you look at his coat, I just did this. I started doing one side. I'm going to blend that other side in as well. That's not looking too bad. What I did is I combined, for Slick's coat, granite gray, just a little bit of it, to the pewter gray to try and get it as close as possible as I can. And again, I think I didn't do too bad of a job with that. The big test will clearly be that discoloration that is here. And then if we flip it around to the other side, you can see where I've done somewhat of one side because it hasn't dried yet, and then we're going to try and get rid of that discoloration as well. So let me do that coat, and then we'll see how he looks. He's going to need another coat. I clearly need to find a yellow with his tie, because the only yellow that I have it's like a bright yellow, and it's more of like a lemonade yellow. So I'm gonna have to go and try and get some of that tomorrow at Walmart. So we'll have to do the second part of this video, but I'll show you again. Let me try this tonight and see how it goes, and then I'll probably take a break and we'll fire it back up again tomorrow. Okay, so here is Slick with his second coat. Again, I mixed it with the granite gray and the pewter gray. So there's 50 cents a piece right there at Walmart. Mixed it together. It's mostly the pewter gray, the darker color, and then a little bit of the granite gray. And then I would add a little bit more to the pewter gray later just to darken it up. So again, a lot of stuff is still drying, so don't worry about the discoloration. It looks like you can see a little bit more on his face. I will try to touch that up later, get a little bit more of that darker that's in there. Once it dries, it'll probably look a lot better. But how about the coat now? Look at the coat. It doesn't look too bad as it's been blended in. I also did his pants up just to match it as much as I can. We'll turn around, and this is where you had the big black splotches on the back, if you remember from the early part of the video. And that looks pretty good. Doesn't look too bad at all. Don't worry about it having that dried paint kind of textured look. It'll get glossed back up because one thing that we're going to do is at the end, and I'm going to swivel around so hopefully you don't get sick on it. One of the last things that I do is I actually Modge Podge it. So any of them that I have done, and we can just grab Don Muraco, is I redid his shirt and his hair, and I added in his shorts, pretty much everything. Anything that I redid, I Modge Podged so that it gives it a more glossy feel to it, and the paint does not come off. And that really goes for any of these guys that are in here. Jimmy Hart there, I did almost an entire repaint, Axe, and you can see they will maintain that glossiness with that Modge Podge. It really does a nice job of sealing things up as well. So I'm going to hold off for Slick for tonight and try and finish him up tomorrow. I'm pretty pleased with it so far. I do need to get some of that yellow. Need to try and blend that a little bit more in his face, and we're going to look at some of the finer points to him. Like, I'm not sure what the buttons and the chain and the rings, I don't know what they were originally colored, but we'll try to attack that again tomorrow. So not too bad. Made some pretty good progress in about an hour and a half, and we'll finish the video tomorrow. Alright, so I was able to go to the store today. I went to Walmart, and I needed to get something to kind of get close to that yellow that you see here for Slick. The best that I could find is something that was called Yellow Flame. So we're going to try that out. It's close. I still think this is more of like a lemon/lemonade color, but you know, we're going to give it a try anyways. So I did let Slick dry overnight. The gray looks pretty good. I like how it looks. It doesn't look too bad. There's not a lot that I think that I have to recover and redo, but once I get him down here, okay. I do note that his face, I do need to work on a little bit more. Clearly it's a darker skin tone, so it's hard to see with that shadow there, but now you can notice that. So I'm going to touch him up just a little bit, get a little bit closer. I bought some finer brushes, again from Walmart. $4 for nice little thin bristles, so that will help me out. I also see that some of this black needs touching up, and what else did I think I was going to do? Maybe looking at his rings or his chain that you can see here. I'm going to try and make that silver as well. I do have some silver color, so that's what I'll work on here. Give me a few minutes and I'll do this, and I mean, it won't be a few minutes to you, but anyways, it will be to me, and I'll let you know what it looks like. Okay, so the next round of painting is finished on Slick. I want to show you what I've done. So what I did is I did some of the finer details on Slick. I cleaned up some of the black paint. I redid his facial parts, just kind of gave it a little bit of blending in there. I did some of his details I used granite gray, which is right there. So it kind of sets it off from the more pewter gray that I used, and that includes like the little what do you call them? The cufflinks? Yeah, the cufflinks. I don't know. I don't wear suits very often. The cufflinks of Slick. So there's where he stands right now. I'm pretty pleased with him. The only thing is, if I look closely, I see that his tie's not great. I still want it a little more yellow, so I think I'm going to match or try to mix the bright yellow that I have with a little bit of white to dumb it down a little bit, because I just feel like this is a little bit too pale. But he doesn't look too bad, so I'm nearly finished with him. I don't think there's really any more details that I'll use. He does have a belt, but I don't think the original color had the belt on it, or the original belt had color on it. That's better wording. Backside looks pretty good. It's just a couple spots from him sitting there. That'll just come off. And I think I'll touch up the rings. He's got a couple rings on some fingers, so I think I'll just add some gold here and there on there as well. So I'll stop her again and give you another update once I get this finished. Slick out. Okay, so here's where I stand now on Slick. I did some touching up on him. I added more of a lemon color on his tie and his, I don't know, what napkin thing, whatever you call that. I'm not hoity-toity. So what I did is I blended some basic yellow, the bright yellow. I put some on my little container, and then I just put one drop of white, and that gave me more of the lemon color that I was looking for on this. I had to do a couple coats and a little bit of repaint on it. I couldn't get that little black dot. I don't know if it's, what is that, an onyx thing? Is tie pin, whatever. I don't know. It just didn't look right to me. I also added, and I know this isn't original because I just looked it up. I don't know why it wouldn't be, but I added a finer detail of a lighter gray for his buttons, and then for his chain across. I found a couple versions of it that had this on there, but then I found one that was mint and packaged, and it was just all black. I'm going to keep it like this because that's how I like it. So, you know, when you do these things, if you want it original, do it original, be boring. Or, you know, customize it. Do whatever you want, whatever you feel like. But I think this gives a little more of a flair to it, much like I did with just even adding those little elements right there on the side. I think that's pretty important. So whatever, bottom line, make it your own, however you want to do it. So I'm going to leave it like this because I think it's cool. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to let it dry overnight. I'm going to double check it. I'm going to make sure that white, and sorry for the light, the white doesn't reflect very well. I want to make sure that the brown on the face dries better, and so does the white on the shirt. So if I'm happy with it, then what my final thing will be tomorrow is a simple Modge Podge. Modge Podge does a nice job of sealing it, but then also giving it that gloss that you have typically on your figures. Because right now, because he's got most of the paint on it, he's a flat kind of gloss. But then here's good old Hillbilly Jim, who's got that very plasticky look, and that's kind of what we're going for on this once it's all said and done. So I will do another little quick thing tomorrow. We'll see how Slick looks, and I'm pretty pleased with it. He's looking pretty fine. Okay, so here we are with Slick. We are on to the final stage. I left him dry overnight, did a little double check on him. Everything looks pretty good. As I said before in this video, customize them however you want to. If you want to keep them original and try to get them to where they were before, that's fine. Do whatever makes you happy. I'm pretty happy with how it is. I think it'll look pretty good once it's all said and done. I'm going to put my first coat of Modge Podge on. Actually, my only coat. I only do one coat of Modge Podge. This is a nice little kind of glossy, seals everything up once you're all said and done. So it's actually really easy to use. My mother-in-law did some 3D puzzles for my son, made the Millennium Falcon and made the Star Destroyer in big 3D, and then she used Modge Podge to kind of hold it all together. And that was, goodness, it stuck together. Let's say it's almost 10 years ago, and they've still held well together. So what I do is I just pour it into the lid. You don't need much, just need a little bit. It's also the reason why my lid sticks all the time, because that's just how I do it. But I also use a brush. It's like this. It's a different type of bristle. I think that it does a much better job than just a normal paintbrush does on my figures. So it's fairly simple, and I want to make sure I can get this on camera. So I'll got to kind of cockeye it. I don't have a whole lot of room on my desk. So I dip a little bit in. I don't get a lot on it. I made that mistake on my first figures, and I had a lot of glop on it. So we'll start with the backside. Just put it on, and if you have a big amount there, that's actually okay, because then we're just going to thin it out as much as we can. Trying to get as much coverage, just making sure, like with normal paint, it doesn't, your brush doesn't get too dry. And then I go back over it. I just don't want any kind of glop anywhere. And so this actually for his back is going to be good enough. And I know you can see it, but Modge Podge dries clear. So that'll be good. And it dries fast too. So within an hour, we'll come back down here and we'll see how Slick is looking. And remember his back the other day and all that stuff up here, and that's pretty well gone. And so like I said, this will just gloss it up. I'm not going to go through the whole process. I'll just turn this off, and then we'll join back up and we'll finish things off for Slick. Okay, so I changed my mind. I wanted to show you what his upper torso looks like, all Modge Podge. And this is okay. You're like, oh man, it looks pretty terrible. This is how Modge Podge is. I learned early on, I only Modge Podge what I need, or what I have painted. And there's nothing wrong with Modge Podging everything. I just don't feel like if it's already got the rubber sheen on it, that you need to go back over. But when you paint, you kind of make it that flat again. And the Modge Podge really, like I said, just kind of seals everything up and gives you that gloss that some of these figures have. And I showed you my my ones I've done before, and those look pretty good like this. So this will dry really well. You just go over it. One more time, and I've done all this stuff, and I just take the brush without podge on it, and I'll go back over the head again, because with his hair, he's got some crevices, and I don't want it to chunk into there. Not that it'll be bad, but I made that mistake on a Mr. Fuji, and I had too much and it dried, and then I had to take an X-Acto knife and kind of take it off. So that's what he looks like. He'll dry well. I'm going to do the bottom part. You can see it's a little more flat. I need to do the legs. And then I'll do about a minute left, and I'll show you, what he looks like. That's it. Okay, so here's the last shot for Slick. This is him all cleaned up. You can see now with the Modge Podge on it that he has gotten a little more gloss to him, so the flat paint has gone away. It's hard to tell, but everything is sealed. Looks a lot better than it did before. It's still drying a little bit. I only gave it about 10 minutes, so it'll look probably a little bit better when it's all said and done. You can see a little bit of the Modge Podge still on there. But it quick dries, and then he's glossy to the touch, very similar to what you would feel with, like here's Hillbilly Jim, maybe not such the rubbery, not so rubbery, I guess, but it looks pretty good, from when I started off. I'm happy with it. Like I said, if you like different style, if you want to customize it, if you want to keep it the same, good, there, go ahead and do that. We will notice that these later figures do get a little more complex than just the big old head monster Hillbilly Jim, like 3 colors and that's it. It's a little more complex, but hey, I enjoy it. So hopefully you learned something from this video. Give it a like. I'll try and do better with my speaking in the next ones. I'm still learning how to do it. Get out of here, Hillbilly Jim. But that's it. Need to find a few more wrestlers to put in here. I've done a total of 35. That's my in memoriam battle royal. And then I have some of the rest of the figures that I've done here. All of them I have touched up. And so I'm going to be looking for a few more. I'll probably do some repeats and then just flip them as I can, just to do a few more videos. So there you go. Hopefully you enjoyed this. Say goodnight, Slick. One thing that I pointed out in my original video is I have 2 collections going. I have what I call my living legends, those that are still with us. And then I have over here in the corner, I have the Memorial Battle Royal, which are those WWF heroes who have passed away. And unfortunately, as I started videotaping this, King Kong Bundy passed away last night. King Kong Bundy, who was, in all honesty, one of the people that scared me the most. when I watched wrestling early on as a kid, he burst onto the scene, got into WrestleMania pretty quickly, took on Hulk Hogan. There's a whole storyline of him crushing Hulk Hogan's ribs, and as a kid, I bought into it. I thought this guy was super scary. Kind of wish he had a better career than he did. Left WWF after a short stint, and then kind of worked on the independent circuits. Passed away at age 61. Also famous for being in the Married with Children series and the movie Moving as well, in which he was pretty good. So unfortunately, I am moving him now to my in memoriam, and I will always put them in the middle. So the last person here to pass away was good old Mean Gene. So I'm going to push him towards the back, and now we're going to give King Kong Bundy the center of the squared circle. So there you go. Just my way to remember my heroes from the past.